Good evening. You are listening to me, Niall, on Teachers Talk Radio. Coming up on today's show, I will be joined by Frank Norris, MBE, and Stan Johnson to discuss what has caught their eye this week. Dennington's Diaries returns to the airwaves as we discuss the latest fieldwork consultation and the importance of subject knowledge when teaching. As always, please share the show, text in, call in at any time, and let's be positive this evening on Teachers Talk Radio.
Live from Norwich, this is The Late Show with Niall Cole on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
Hello, half term is over and we can finally... No. Hello. So half term is over. We finally get a rest. You can stop being a member of the Teach 5 o'clock club and have a lay-in this week. So I don't know about you, but I am extremely tired. I have a banging headache, but we are here. We have a splendid show coming up for you. So coming up, I will be joined by Nick Morris, MBE, and Stan Johnson to discuss what has caught their eye this week, including the signals of trust and respect through the lens of Dominic Cummings' rummagings this week and the continuing mess that is teacher assessed or centre assessed grades, depending on what your school calls it. Then we will discuss fieldwork and the current fieldwork / non-examined assessment debate. And then we'll have the long anticipated and awaited return of Dennington's Diaries, where I'll be joined by Harriet Dennington and we'll converse over the importance of subject knowledge when teaching and if some classes are destined to be no more than an hour of childcare. If you have missed any shows this week on Teachers Talk Radio, you can head over to our website at www.ttradio.org and listen back at any time. As you can now also subscribe and stay in the loop with the latest Teachers Talk Radio news. Good evening, Alice. I can see you nice and clearly. Good evening, and I hope you enjoy the show. So, to start off with, after the news, I will be joined by Frank Norris, MBA, and Stan Johnson. We'll be talking about everything that they've heard this week. So here is the news, latest news, 28th of May, and Megan Goods.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. Dominic Cummings has called the Prime Minister's decision to go toe-to-toe with footballer Marcus Rashford over the free school meals debacle stupid. Speaking at the 7-hour joint session of the Commons Health and Science and Technology Committees, Cummings was quoted saying, "For example, the whole thing with Rashford. The Director of Communications said to the Prime Minister twice, 'Do not pick a fight with Rashford. Obviously, we should do this instead.' The Prime Minister decided to pick a fight and then surrendered twice." It has been ruled that a teacher at Batley Grammar School who was suspended for using an image of the Prophet Muhammad in lessons may return to the classroom. The trust running the school said in a report that teaching staff genuinely believed that using the image had an educational purpose and benefit, but topics could have been effectively addressed in other ways and without using the image, and it was not necessary for staff to use the material in question to deliver the learning outcomes on the subject of blasphemy. The report from the Trust acknowledged the deep offence caused by the image to a number of students, parents and members of the school community, and stated that they deeply regret the distress caused. Eight teaching unions have joined together to write a letter to the Education Secretary, demanding accurate data on new numbers of COVID cases in schools be released. Ongoing outbreaks have caused many schools to close or send students home already. The letter stated that there are growing concerns around the variant B.1.6172, and reports from areas such as Bolton that cases are growing fastest amongst school-aged children, with cases in Bolton higher now than at any point during the pandemic. On Thursday, the Office for National Statistics published data showing the percentage of school staff testing positive for COVID antibodies resulting from infection increased significantly between December and March when schools fully reopened.
That was your daily education news briefing.
Live from Norwich, this is The Late Show with Niall Cole on Teachers Talk Radio.
Yes, so we're back and we are live. I'm just waiting for Stan Johnson and Frank Norris MB to call in. Stan Johnson did call in, but I think that we may have been having some connection issues there. So I'm just waiting for them to call in. We will be discussing anything that has caught their eye this week in the news, in and around education. So I know that Stan particularly wants to talk about Dominic Cummings and some elements of trust and respect that kind of underpin that, and something definitely that will call into that we'll look at as well. Okay. Hey Stan, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, Stan.
Hi. Oh, right, you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you all loud and clear.
Oh, excellent.
Brilliant. So I think we're just waiting for Frank still, but I'll introduce you, Stan, and then we can get started on the conversation, and hopefully Frank can join us very shortly.
Okay.
So Stan has been involved in the education of children and young people for over 40 years as a teacher, head teacher, schools advisor, local authority, senior manager, and head of school improvement. He is an experienced trainer in school leadership and management and was the author and main contributor to the Lancashire Framework for Leadership. He continues to support schools and is the education advisor to a company specialising in public sector transformation. He is the managing director of Bina Education Limited, which provides advisory support to 50 plus primary schools in the Northwest. So good evening, Stan.
Good evening. That was a bit longer perhaps than you wanted, was it?
It was quite long, but it covers the full story and the expansive experience that you have. So it still does the job.
Okay. It just means I'm old.
Well, there are two ways to look at it, but there's nothing certainly wrong with either experience or age either, Stan, I'm sure, and I'm sure the listeners would agree as well. So should we talk about Dominic Cummings then? Frank told me earlier that kind of you might have a particular kind of point that you would like to discuss about kind of respect and stuff. So would you like to start there?
Yeah, well, when Frank and I chat about these things, we try and focus on schools and how these issues sort of appear in a school leadership issue rather than government. And my point today when we were chatting was about just where does integrity lie when somebody knows that things aren't right in the leadership? Is that, that would be the same in a school as it is in government, that if you know it's not right, do you continue to support it on the basis that you believe that's the right thing to do? Or do you say at some point, this isn't right, we need to change it? And have people got the courage to actually do that? I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that Dominic Cummings had courage to do what he did. I'm not sure what his motivation was for doing it. But it's that bit that if something's going wrong anyway, it's going to come out at some point. You can't bottle up everything that's chaotic and hope that loyalty keeps everybody keeping quiet. And I think this has opened a can of worms. And occasionally we find that in schools where finally somebody says this isn't working or this aspect of the leadership's gone wrong. And then more people come to the front and say, yeah, I knew that and I knew that, but I didn't like to say.
Yeah, I think that's like kind of, I guess that just happens a lot in life, doesn't it? Kind of things happen and you maybe have a conversation that kind of, something's not quite right, or there's something that you would change and you're happy to have that kind of private conversation, or you always talk about it, but then actually turning that into, okay, when does this become an official sort of thing, or where do we actually follow those chains is quite a hard one, I think, to probably get across. And I guess some schools maybe, I guess it's about culture, isn't it? And if you feel comfortable to raise up those issues early on, you've probably got a better culture than if actually people all know there's a kind of occurring regularly, but no one's saying anything and kind of feels almost too scared to say anything.
Yeah, school culture is really important. We've just done a series of training sessions with about 50 schools where we were looking at exactly at that culture issue and how do you create an atmosphere, the phrase is psychologically safe, where people can feel that they can say what they think without fear of intimidation, without fear of embarrassment, without being laughed at for a silly question. And it's very hard to create that atmosphere unless everybody at the top end of the school want that to happen.
Yeah, I think Frank has now joined us. Frank, can you hear us? Okay. Yeah, you
I can.
Brilliant.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's fine, Frank.
You get to 65, Niall, and some of the technology starts to defeat you. I used to think I was quite geeky, but I don't anymore. But anyway, I'm glad to be able to join you. Has Stan been talking about something he was chatting about today on our video cast?
Yeah, what we've said, Frank, is I was just talking about integrity and whether people have the confidence in a school culture to say at leadership level things aren't working right, and probably more to the point, who do they raise that with, and when?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Today we were talking to Emma Knights, the CEO of the National Governors Association, and we were talking about mechanisms that should exist in schools which enable senior leaders, governors, trustees to get a really good sense of the sort of feelings within the school, both within the sort of the culture, but also from the sort of the feelings of staff and the feelings of students or pupils and the feelings of parents and carers. And I know that I think I told the story when I was the CEO of the Co-op Academies Trust. As the sponsor is the Co-op is the largest business sponsor of academies in the country, and we benefited immensely from the sort of the approaches that the Co-op takes in terms of engaging with its members, engaging with its staff to better understand how it can improve. And so a lot of that was done. There's a lot of openness, a lot of staff surveys were taken really, really seriously, and I don't think that they're taken quite so seriously in some schools as perhaps they ought to be. And in fact, in some schools, there is no staff survey. So, I think these are all sort of measures that you can take to ensure that you open up avenues for the staff to be able to sort of make a point, and also to sort of, for governors, also trustees, to get a sense of, a sort of sense check of as to how things are working in the school.
Yeah, definitely. Because I always think with that's what I was thinking with kind of like surveys in the past. It is obviously they're great if they're acted upon and actually staff feel that they're listened to. The alternative, and sometimes it happens, is kind of in schools and in general, is that you do a survey because you want to appear that you are kind of asking staff how they feel, but then you never act on it. And actually, so all staff feel is that they are being asked, but then never listened to. And I guess in that sense, you actually always need to show to them that you are listening to them by changing whatever it is that they're constantly telling you that they disagree with. If not, you actually kind of have the reverse impact. And we've got a question in here from Alice, and she said, COVID has been really difficult and unprecedented, though. So many head teachers are having to make decisions that they should have been guided by the government with. Do you think that people might be too harsh and ready to use head teachers as scapegoats over the last year? So I'll open that up to either of you, on if you'd like to answer that.
I think probably 99% of head teachers have made the right decisions under pressure. You'd be surprised how many decisions a day a head teacher takes. I would doubt anybody would try to throw a head teacher under the bus for the circumstances they've been in the last 18 months. And I think really any survey of parents is showing that to be true.
Yeah, Ofsted produced something this week, didn't it, that said that the vast majority of parents were either very satisfied or highly satisfied with the response of the school during the pandemic. I mean, being controversial, if it was between, the support that the Department for Education has provided, both in terms of quality and timeliness, and the actions of all or nearly all of the head teachers in the country, I'm pretty certain I know where most people would lay their money, in terms of where they feel their allegiances are, where perhaps the best responses have come from. So I think that that's a really, and in a way, it's quite interesting because I continue to think about how centralized everything is, and actually there are risk assessments being made on a regular basis by senior leaders and governors and trustees, which actually sort of respond to individual circumstances. And I trust that local knowledge. I trust that far more than I do from Whitehall or from sanctuary buildings.
I do think heads need to, if they're feeling like that, need to talk to governors, and if they feel they need some support in the decision making, then sharing the decision with governors or with a couple of governors, just as a soundbite, just to get some idea back of whether the governors think that's okay, is a bit of reassurance. I understand it's still the head's decision, but there's a bit of reassurance that you're being supported by your governing body.
I also think, Niall, that there are certain types of head teachers, certain types of heads with a certain type of leadership, which they find this sort of sharing, this sort of like collaborative decision making quite tricky because it's not in their sort of nature, So I think it's, for me, I know I've known Stan for a long time and he's known me. I think we are a similar breed, that I don't think we're the sort of people that would say there are times to show absolute leadership, but more often than not, the right decisions are made when decisions are shared, and advice is taken. And I think that those head teachers who have demonstrated that approach are more likely to get a sound judgment in terms of moving forward than those that feel as though they're at the top of the bridge on the vessel and they're going to decide the journey. So
I think that comes back to. Oh, sorry, Sam. I was just going to say that I think that comes back to what you said this week actually as well, Frank, when you're talking about kind of being in a classroom, and we're talking about kind of the difference being at like the different end of the spectrum, and me kind of being a trainee and like everyone within schools. There's so many different roles within schools that see kids and see different things from so many different angles that actually, if one person is just going to answer it from their viewpoint, say whether that's a head or anyone else that's making it in the decision-making process, they're not actually going to be able to have all of the full picture. So they could easily do something that they think, well, from my experience, this is the best way to go forward. But actually, the scores are way too complicated for one person to instantly know everything that's going on and to make the perfect decision. In most cases, obviously, sometimes, like you said, heads do need to make a decision. But actually, more often than not, like kind of consulting everyone around you is really important. Stan, go ahead and say what you're going to say.
All I was going to say was when I was a head, I had a particular governor who was very bright, very able to support me, had a background in education, and I used to use him as a sounding board. And I remember once I was writing a letter when I was particularly angry, and I sent it to him first to say, what do you think? And he said, that's a brilliant letter, well written, well structured. Now put it in the bin and don't send it. And I think you could do that. I mean, emails are a bit too instant, aren't they, for that? But sending an email that you're about to send, to the governors to say, just check this out for me, it isn't a bad move. And I, before heads go mad and say there isn't time in the day for that and the governors are all working, I understand all that. I've been there and done it. So I'm just saying that's another thing you might consider, and at times you might be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
So we talked a little bit. So let's talk about like integrity and kind of the recommendations. So we talked about heads kind of asking different people and making and kind of talking to governors, perhaps in that instance. What other things would you say schools could do? They were trying to make a process as open as possible in a culture kind of all the way through where staff feel comfortable to say something. So we'll start off with that, and then we'll come on to maybe what to do if you are working in a school where that didn't happen and when you know exactly the point to kind of pull the trigger as such. So, yeah.
Well, I think for me, I mean, my teaching career or my leadership career started in a bank, and this was in 1974. Believe it or not, I was on a leadership training program in 1974 for a bank, and at that stage there was a the emphasis was always on, not the customer's always right or the staff member's always right, but actually, the emphasis was always on the staff member, the customer. We're all part of the team, and so in effect, that sense of knowing your team and knowing how they feel, and actually knowing them as an individual. Even if you're you're ahead of a 2,500 pupil student school, there is still, and it's important to have a relationship with the colleagues that you work with, and to know. I mean, I have to say, one of the most impressive leaders I've ever worked with was Sir David Bell, the former HMCI in Ofsted. I remember.
Frank, I thought you were going to say me then.
No, sorry, Stan. When I've had a few beers, Stan, I'm like, no. But actually, I think one of the things that struck me, I mean, he was a really impressive individual, and what he was able to do was able to connect on a personal level with his staff. And I remember I bumped into him at the DFE buildings a few days before he left to take on another role, and he said to me, "Oh, Frank, how's Arlene and the 3 kids? How are they doing?" And Arlene's my wife. And I thought, my goodness, that was so impressive, and actually that was 20 years ago, but actually that was all based on him knowing me. And I couldn't tell you how many children he had. I knew he supported Rushden and Diamonds Football Club, but I don't know his wife's name or nothing. He had that ability to connect with you as an individual. And I did lots of extra work because, I had a loyalty to David because of the fact that A, I liked him, and B, he showed genuine interest in me as an individual. So, and let's face it, Ofsted's a big place. There are a lot of people and the pressure's great, but actually that never got in the way of his ability to support me and to connect with me. He was truly amazing at that level.
I think if we're talking about building a culture where that can happen, I think schools have got to start re-asking the question, what sort of school do we want to be? And what sort of people do we want to be? And what sort of relationships do we want to have? And how do we run this school in the way we want it to be run? And if you go back to basic values like that and you establish those values, you can also establish a set of behaviours, and by that I don't mean what time you arrive and what time you leave and what you wear. I mean, this is how we will relate to each other, and how we'll relate to the students, and how we relate to parents. And we nail our colours to the flag with this. We're not going to go away from this. This is what the school we want to be. And then when you're recruiting, you can actually say, this is who we are. If that's not your model, don't come.
I think that's
this
really
is what we're about.
I found that so much. I keep saying that because a lot of people, like kind of within my network, like training network now, obviously going through the job process, and kind of a lot of rejections and a lot of different. They kind of go to schools and they apply, and then they kind of don't get it, and they feel quite dejected by it. I think genuinely the culture fit is really important as in teaching. Is you want to, and sometimes rejection isn't the fact that it's not saying you're a bad teacher or that you can't teach or anything like that. It's just that actually you're probably not necessarily the right teacher for them at that point in time for what they're looking for. But that probably means, without necessarily, you might not know that at the time, but that actually that wouldn't necessarily be the best school for you. And like, finding that best school and that culture fit is really important.
Niall, it's a blind date. Actually, in effect, we say, oh, well, the school rejected me. I mean, a colleague spoke to me recently and said, it's a 2-day interview. Don't quite feel right about it at the end of the first day. They've asked me back. They've only asked 2 back. And actually, I said, well, look, if you're feeling that way now, don't go ahead. This is like your second date. You didn't really like the first date. Why are you going back for a second date? So in a way, as Stan was saying, it's a 2-way process, this. And actually, candidates should be honest with themselves. If they don't, and we all know when we've met somebody and you think, oh, this feels right. There's something about this. You're not being swayed. There is a little bit about that initial contact, and you think, yeah, there's a connection. I think if you've got that connection, then there's a fair chance it works. But this idea that you just, I hear colleagues say, I got my first teaching job, it's my dream school. And I think, well, do you really know that school to say it's your dream school? So I think it's a two-way thing. And my daughter had, what was it, 5 initial interviews before she got her first teaching job. It's competitive out there. So don't, the fact you get to an interview, that it will get better. Sometimes you need 2 or 3 interviews to knock the cobwebs away and to get a feel for it and to get into the flow of it. So I'd encourage people just to keep going. There will be a job there for them, I'm sure.
It's the same with leadership. I mean, when I was working in a local authority, interviewed lots of people for headship, and I got fed up with the standard question that was, what's your vision for this school? And everybody's practiced that. Everybody can show their PowerPoint and can talk about it. But actually, I started saying, no, this school has a vision. The governors hold the vision. So the question should be, how are you going to move this vision forward? Here's our vision. What are you going to do to contribute to taking that forward? Not what's your vision.
Yeah, I agree entirely with that.
If the head teacher comes in, in some schools you can have 3 or 4 head teachers in a short period of time. If each have a different vision and each are turning the school into a different type of organisation, it's chaos.
Yeah, it was interesting when I stepped down from the CEO role in the co-op. We actually planned it so that we did a formal review of the strategy for the trust for the next 5 years, and we used that as the basis for the appointment. So actually, it wasn't a case of saying, "Tell us what your vision is." We were saying to candidates, "This is the vision. Can you deliver it for us?" And actually, that's the right way to do it. As Stan says, some schools, for whatever reason, can end up with quite a few head teachers in a very short period of time. Just taking the example that was used by Dominic Cummings this week, it's a bit like a shopping trolley, isn't it? It's just veering all over the show. So I think governors have that role to set the strategic direction for the school. And in a way, if they do that, then that relationship with the head teacher is slightly different from the point whereby they say, "Hey, folks, we don't know what we're doing. You tell us what you want us to do." It's the wrong way around. So I think senior leaders need to, governors need to set the agenda or set the direction, and then the head teachers deliver it.
Yeah, I think because I think that's like really true. I actually think as well. My personal opinion is if you think about teaching all the way through, is even in a classroom, like you are almost, I think, should be like the leader in the room. And I kind of always say, well, like you and again, you set your kind of values. Obviously, you have the school values and the school ethos that you are trying to mirror, but then you also have your own expectations. Just coming back to your point earlier, Frank, about kind of there's actually some of the best leaders that the ones that actually just kind of almost know you as a person, can build those relationships, and that happens all the way through life, doesn't it? It's interesting that actually sometimes, and again with students, if you show an interest to students, sometimes the results that you get from that are kind of far greater, because they suddenly go, oh, I was asking this question about me. He's actually taking an interest in me, and they actually want to get to know me. They're not just seeing they're not seeing themselves as someone that's there to do a job and to kind of convey that language.
Niall, I'll draw Stan in now with his outdoor education hat on, because that's a big thing for Stan, isn't it? That's a big thing for you.
It is. But I was just going to finish that off by saying, if you're not very good at doing what Frank's just suggested, being able to remember details about people, there will be somebody on the staff, on the senior leadership team that is. I had a fantastic deputy who would say to me, "Don't forget that such a body's children are doing their exams today, and she'll be under a bit of pressure." And you think, right, oh yeah, I didn't know that, but I know now. Then you go and see them and say, "I hope the kids are all right today." And you've made that connection. So there will be people who can help you if you're not good at that sort of thing. So make the team work for you is the way I look at it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was very fortunate. I never appointed a deputy to the school. I was head of 2 schools. But the second deputy, where I was there for 10 years, she did exactly what you said, Stan. And
Right.
I have to say, she was criticised because unfairly, she never really liked taking school assemblies, and staff viewed that as, that she's not really wanted to do that, as if that was a weakness. But she gave so much to me as a leader, it was, and we were, we did complement each other, I think, and I was better because she was there, and I think I offered her a lot, and supported her, because I knew how much she gave. I have to say though, we never blew up in public. We never got to a select committee and revealed all our weaknesses and failings. I think that is just unbelievable.
Yeah, but
and also
she's got them all written down, Frank. It's as soon as it's worth doing.
I found it all amazing that a senior advisor can actually simply walk out of 10 Downing Street with his phone, with photographs, with everything. I just find that unbelievable. But anyway, well, I'm pleased to say that there are dysfunctional things that happen in school, but there's a level of dysfunctionality which I think, if what was said this week is true, actually makes it rather difficult for government to criticise senior leadership in many schools.
Sorry, Frank, you were going to say something about outdoor ed. Is that? I was
just saying, because I think that's an area that you feel very strongly.
Well, I do.
Provides that angle, doesn't it?
But more than that, I think it's about, when you're planning the curriculum, you plan it with experiences planned as well. So it's not just what the children will learn, and not just how they'll learn it. It's under what circumstances and what experiences will they have that will support that understanding. Now, I believe outdoor ed is one of the major ones for providing children the opportunity to work cooperatively, to show leadership, to be problem solving, and to enjoy it. And what I fear at the moment is the cost of outdoor ed, because it's not supported by great amounts of money, is it's being squeezed, and not enough children, in my view, are getting the opportunity to do residential, and I think residential is different from doing a day in an outdoor ed centre or forest schools and stuff like that, which I support. But there's something different about doing a residential, and I think every school should plan for something like a residential outdoor ed as part of the curriculum, not as, we do that, because it's got to fit in with everything else that goes on, and it's got to be part of the culture of the school.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The CEO's taken over from me at the co-op. He introduced residentials at farms, and I believe some of the kids have done lambing. They've actually brought a new lamb into the world. And actually, I think those are sorts of experiences I personally would have loved to have had. And actually, we're going to need. I hope there's still going to be an agricultural industry, going ahead. We need people that are willing to and able to do those sorts of tasks. So I really think that it offers so much more. And just I have a big thing about digital and the digital world and our ability as a nation to capitalize on that, and all of the things that Stan spoke about in terms of what outdoor education provide. Those are the skills that digital industries require, and actually this idea that it's all about the knowledge, folks. I'm sorry, I'm just not down that road whatsoever. I think that this is, about knowledge, skills, understanding, and behaviors that are central to what a good education is. And if we try and make it look as though the skill element of it is not central to this, which I think is where some colleagues have gone more recently, I think that that's quite a dangerous place to get to. And it's little wonder that we talk about a skills deficit, when we don't actually value that. Some very interesting work which has been going on about trying to find to not reject, but to counter that argument. And certainly, there are colleagues I know in the north who are doing their utmost to make the case for skill development, and for that to be central to a good education.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
I had a PE specialist who worked with me who did PE drama, and a phrase he used to me once when we were chatting, he was talking about how PE links with literacy, and I was sort of going, yeah, go on, tell me how that works. And he said, and I think this is really important, how can a child write about creeping and crawling if they've never done it? How do they know the difference between those two words if they've not acted that out in drama to understand the difference between creep and crawl? And I think that's really powerful if you think about when you plan your experiences into your curriculum.
Yeah,
you make drama, you make it all has to link together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I think, like I say, there's just too much of a divide, and I think, like, from a geography perspective, like when you try to teach maths and geography and try to show that actually it's the same thing, you're just applying it to a different concept or to real life problems. And like it would be something like percentage changes, and it kind of sometimes students can just go, "Oh, I don't really understand this at all." They could be set one maths, and they could in maths easily do a percentage change. It's that not realizing the balance between the two, and that just shows if that happens, that is almost showing the disconnect in your curriculum, that they don't actually understand that when they're doing percentage changes and percentage increases, that's not some abstract calculation, that actually you can apply that to real life statistics, real life data, and then make an interpretation from that. And like you say, if your curriculum is all the way through embedded and you make those links really clear, then it becomes a lot easier to cross apply all of those skills that students develop and not just look at them individually.
Yeah, no, because you're understanding them. You're understanding them rather than just having the skill to do them. Those are, for me, those are two different things.
Yeah.
Understanding and knowing are very different.
I didn't actually fully understand percentages until I worked in a bank. When I had to, it really meant something. If I got it wrong, it was going to cost us money, so my learning on percentages grew rapidly when it actually had a purpose and a reason. And there was a serious challenge at the end of it that actually could lose my job if I get it wrong, but actually somebody here could lose quite a lot of money. And actually, my percentage work improved dramatically, and I actually did understand it. And actually, I think there is this idea of in primary education preserving that sense of topic, of cross-curricular work, that's still rooted in the very best early years provision. That's where it's at, folks.
Absolutely.
And actually, what we do is we gradually move away from that into a subject-based thing. So the point you're making there, Niall, you're talking like a primary specialist. You're seeing that the percentages is the thing we've got to get across. And actually, if we can present that in a variety of ways, then actually there's a better chance that children will understand it, rather than it being self-contained within a maths lesson or self-contained within a geography lesson. So
often if you look at independent learning, it's at its best in reception and then slowly disappears, so that by year 6 there's virtually none.
Yeah, I had this conversation with my granddad, or grandpa, who came on the show a couple of weeks ago, and then I had this conversation last week because I did a lesson with one of my year 8s about independent inquiry, and I gave them loads of different things. So they had loads of questions still, and it was kind of, we got to the end of a topic, and I gave them, they said, "Oh, what about this? What about that?" And I was like, "Well, I'll give you all the things," and kind of gave them the complete kind of autonomy and empowerment to go and investigate. And I don't think that is done loads in schools, but like you say, like my grandpa's a primary specialist and has been working with primary schools all of his life, and he was like, well, you are used to doing that at primary school every single all the way through. It's actually at secondary where kind of then almost like secondary teachers lose faith in doing that, or they worry that like students can't be trusted or something like that, and they lose those sort of skills. And actually maybe we should make sure that curriculum from reception all the way through is constantly building those skills, and that we don't then just kind of take that away from them once they get to secondary and kind of start from scratch.
No, I agree. I don't know who your grandfather is, but he sounds as if he should join the Frankenstein chat because he'd get on great with us.
Well, put you in touch, and I think that you'd all have a lovely time.
I mean, one of the
Nothing
things
like making me feel old. That's what my
one of the
granddad
things
agrees with you.
one of the things we spoke about this morning. Now, I don't know if you've got time for this, but we did talk about the pressure that secondary school staff are under at the moment regarding the teachers. Well, it's not teacher assessed grades. This is a school assessed grade. Because they're actually validated by the school. It's it feels as though, I think this idea that it's a teacher, sort of makes it feel as though, well, Niall's giving me the grade, whereas in fact there is a level of quality assurance built into all of this. But it was interesting. We had Professor Andy Hargreaves, a really eminent leader, world leader on leadership, join us because Stan had worked with him a few years ago. And Andy tweeted something this week. It wasn't him, it wasn't his word, but he was pointing towards this tweet, which was talking about, that the research on learning loss is being used to basically sustain a testing culture. And actually what is quite depressing, and I know this might not be, people may agree or disagree with this, so I'm ready for the flak. But actually what we've done is we've taken away the national testing and we've recreated an informal school-based national testing system, because we're so hardwired into testing that it actually feels as though the teach, and I think Ofqual and others are playing this, forcing schools to do this. So I'm not sort of blaming schools or teachers, but actually this should be about schools, teachers and schools determining a level on the basis of the evidence that they've got, not having to test again, but just basically having an understanding about how those children at that level compared to previous years, and to actually ensure that they are then given a grade that enables them to move successfully onto the next stage of learning. For GCSEs, that's very important. For A levels, that's for university entrance and for work or whatever. What this is about is, ensuring that children and young people successfully move on. And actually, I don't, as I said today, I don't give two hoots about grade inflation on this year. This is more important. The individual and their careers and their success is far more important. I mean, at the end of the day, if there was a 15-20% grade inflation, we're going to have to live with it. We'll have to make sure that young people are supported in the next phase, because if they're not at the level that they're expected to be, then sixth form or university is going to have to adapt. This idea that there is, at the end of the day, it's as if the grade inflation is more important than the individual needs of a child. I'm sorry, but if I had a child doing A levels and GCSEs, I don't give two hoots about the grade inflation. I want to make sure that my child gets the grade they deserve and they have the chance to move on. And that has to take into account those of us in the north and other areas that have been adversely hit and continue to be hit by the COVID pandemic. And Stan lives about, 2 miles away from Bolton.
Yeah, just be careful, Frank. I don't want to be banned from places.
But the thing is that we've got places in the north, Rochdale's another, very close to us, that they have had such a dramatic impact on theirs. And actually, we know of other areas in the south, in the southwest, it's minimal. It's been minimal. Apart from the lockdowns themselves, so we need flexibility, we need adjustment, we need this. This is, to me, about leveling up, isn't it? This is making this is equitable, an equitable education system. So I really, I think we pushed that this morning I did. I think that's something that I think Andy Hargreaves is right. I think he's pointing the finger at a testing system which probably, to me, isn't fit for purpose. And I work with the Northern Powers Partnership. I meet businesses very regularly, and they are saying, well, GCSEs, I mean, they're not really doing it for me. They're looking for so much more than that. And what are we delivering? is shocking. It's absolutely shocking.
Yeah.
I think Andy Hargreaves has been against high stakes testing for as long as I've known him, which is probably 25 years, because of the impact of it on schools, on the curriculum, on what children learn, the pressure that comes on the teachers, and all that stops fundamental enjoyment of learning, which is surely what we want. We want children to enjoy learning.
Yeah, when you say that, like, obviously you've got the classic, "Oh, teach the test," but like, and then people say, "Well, we don't teach the test." But actually, as long as the test specifies content that you have to teach and that you have to go through, and you can't specialize or make any adaptations, and you're always going to be teaching to the test in some sort of way.
Well, the thing here, Niall, is, I mean, the challenge is, I wonder how many schools have brought children back after lockdown and basically, rather than trying to engage them in learning, have basically gone through the syllabus and said, you've missed that, I need that to be covered.
Yeah.
That shows you that actually how closely aligned the curriculum has become, and how testing has become sort of like this. Well, it's I was going to use a word there, but I won't. But it's become a sort of the problem about freeing us up. And I think those that are in the knowledge brigade, they are aligned to testing, because they can see that, and they're, I'm not disputing that children need knowledge. Don't get me wrong, they do need knowledge, but actually we have primarily a testing system that doesn't give sufficient emphasis on other aspects of a young person that are crucially important, and we're ignoring that with the system we've got at the moment.
The other bit, which is well illustrated, by the way, Frank's just sort of tried to cover himself on the knowledge bit, is the culture we have at the moment across the country, across many things, is you either have to be on one side or the other. And I want to start a campaign for shades of grey.
I'll join you on that one.
Actually, the nuances, that what we need to be able to do is to say, actually, I agree with, people should have an amount of knowledge because that's important. But if the knowledge isn't underpinned by understanding, then we're not really doing what we should be doing. If we're not careful, we end up with the Trivial Pursuit curriculum, where you can answer questions on how many wives Henry VIII had, but you can't tell me anything about why.
But I think also the thing is, it needs to be calibrated. I know that Stan and I had a year working together in 1995-96 where we worked for Ofsted as seconded head teachers into the inspectorate, and Stan and I did a lot of inspections together in that year. They were primarily in the north, but during that year, I ended up recalibrating. What I felt after that year, that I'd been probably a little bit too heavily focused on skill development and insufficiently focused on knowledge. And I think that what's happened is you need to find space, as Stan says, to sort of, this shades of grey is about calibration, and you need to be able, as a leader, to consider, have I actually gone too far down one road, and is that now affecting the development and to some extent the enjoyment that staff and young people get from the learning experience. So I think that there needs to be this sort of like continual reflection that senior leaders and teachers have, because now you'll be facing this. You might be pulled wanting to do things in a particular way, but then thinking, well, actually, I've probably pushed that a little bit too far now. I need to focus a little bit more on that, and I think that's a really healthy position to get yourself into.
Absolutely. Stan, I'm cautious of time. I think that's basically all we've got time for. But Stan, we are going, the next topic that I'm going to cover is about the non-assessed or non-examined assessment and geography fieldwork consultation, which closes tonight. I don't know if you've kept up with that or know what's kind of been happening with that.
No, I'm sorry, I haven't.
I haven't, but Niall, I'd say the fact that it's assessed, but it's not, you're saying it's assessed, but it's not used. Is that what you're saying?
So non-exam assessment. So for instance, in A-level geography, 20% of their overall grade is non-exam. So it is field work instead of.
Fabulous.
So they would go to they have to do a residential field trip, and then they would have to produce, or they'd have to produce their own like assessment piece. So almost a bit like a mini dissertation. They'll write like an introduction
Fabulous.
and their kind of findings and stuff. But because of COVID, it was postponed this year, or schools weren't required to make their students do it. And then now Ofqual have put forward a consultation whether they think that should be the case next year, because schools may, or because of COVID, maybe still kind of making waves basically, and whether schools are under too much pressure. So essentially, it's a consultation of should they require schools still to do field work next year, or should they let them make the decision themselves, or in some cases tell them that they can't go on field work. So I just wanted to ask Dan where he sided with that.
I think they should make going out on field work compulsory, but not assess it.
Oh,
Okay.
Stan. I'll counter that with actually, what do we mean by field work? I mean, field work, does that actually have to include, heading off to the Lake District or heading off to a city? Isn't there field work that can be undertaken, much more locally?
Yeah.
And I would suggest, I mean, the 20% to me, I probably, where I am at the moment, because I hate this sort of all or nothing type exam approach that we have, I'd be wanting to see that go to 50%. 50% of it.
If you want people to go and do field work and understand it and get something from it, what you'll find is if it's a big amount of the final exam, that you're actually just doing exactly the same thing that you do with the curriculum. You narrow down your experience on field week in order to make sure you can write the piece that gets you the marks.
Students do get to choose their topic though, so it's not a required title. Students can set up the title that they want to investigate, so it's not set. They can, providing that obviously you think that as a teacher they'd be able to get the answers that they need to.
Well, what do you think, Niall?
I'm going to come on to that and discuss that for the next 15 minutes of the show. But you can listen in if you'd like to, or listen back afterwards and kind of see what I'm going to say.
If we're disappearing now, I have to say I've really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you now, and I hope your listeners have enjoyed us wittering on as well.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. No, it's been brilliant. Yeah, go on, Sam.
I was just going to say, people like Frank and I to Waldorf and Stadler from the Muppets at times. So,
photos of us, you'll realise that's quite a good picture. Anyway, can I wish your viewers a great weekend? So it's going to be sunny up north. So I'm looking forward to a family weekend this weekend. Tell the staff, please do not do your assessments this weekend. For heaven's sake,
have a weekend off.
Have a weekend
for the first time in a long year.
Yeah.
It's been
okay.
I'm going to depart now and leave you to it. I'm going to go and see my wife.
So, thanks very much.
Weekend. Cheers.
Thanks
Take care, Stan. Bye, mate.
Take care. Bye.
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 So that was Frank Norris, MBE, and Stan Johnson. They're talking, all things education this week, and many, many more kind of discussions on curriculum, skills, knowledge, kind of the lot, really. So that was a really good conversation. If you are just tuning in and you missed parts of it, then do go to www.ttradio.org and you can see all of the live shows from this week and listen back to them, and you can listen back to that there. But after the news, after this advert, we are going to discuss non-examined fieldwork or non-examined assessments and the fieldwork consultation. So don't go anywhere, and we'll discuss that next.
Introducing Amanda Davey. Amanda is one of the first specialist teacher assessors for dyscalculia in the UK and offers dyscalculia tutoring and bespoke training for schools. With 26 years of teaching and tutoring experience in the UK, Amanda offers specialist online tuition focused on building confidence and developing skills. Amanda also offers online and face-to-face training on dyscalculia for educators, informing practitioners as to how to identify children that may have dyscalculia and how to support them in class. Find out more about Amanda and what she can offer you at www.amanda-davy-dyscalculia.co.uk. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News.
Dominic Cummings has called the Prime Minister's decision to go toe-to-toe with footballer Marcus Rashford over the free school meals debacle stupid. Speaking at the 7-hour joint session of the Commons Health and Science and Technology Committees, Cummings was quoted saying, "For example, the whole thing with Rashford. The Director of Communications said to the Prime Minister twice, 'Do not pick a fight with Rashford.' Obviously, we should do this instead." The Prime Minister decided to pick a fight and then surrendered twice. It has been ruled that a teacher at Batley Grammar School who was suspended for using an image of the Prophet Muhammad in lessons may return to the classroom. The trust running the school said in a report that teaching staff genuinely believed that using the image had an educational purpose and benefit, but topics could have been effectively addressed in other ways and without using the image, and it was not necessary for staff to use the material in question to deliver the learning outcomes on the subject of blasphemy. The report from the Trust acknowledged the deep offence caused by the image to a number of students, parents and members of the school community, and stated that they deeply regret the distress caused. Eight teaching unions have joined together to write a letter to the Education Secretary, demanding accurate data on new numbers of COVID cases in schools be released. Ongoing outbreaks have caused many schools to close or send students home already. The letter stated that there are growing concerns around the variant B.1.6172, and reports from areas such as Bolton that cases are growing fastest amongst school-aged children, with cases in Bolton higher now than at any point during the pandemic. On Thursday, the Office for National Statistics published data showing the percentage of school staff testing positive for COVID antibodies resulting from infection increased significantly between December and March, when schools fully reopened.
That was your daily education news briefing.
Live from Norwich, this is The Late Show with Niall Cole on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome back. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Fieldwork consultation then. So we just talked about a little bit with Stan and Frank there about fieldwork and kind of the values of fieldwork and the skills that fieldwork can open up for different students and the opportunities. So the fieldwork consultation this week it on itself is on whether to continue what they call flexibilities and adaptations made this year and into next year. So the deadline to complete this consultation is tonight at 11:45 p.m. So if this affects you and you haven't already done so, do go and fill out that survey by searching open consultation on arrangements for non-exam assessment for qualifications in 2022. If you follow that, you'll be consulted, you'll be able to give your answers and your opinions, and hopefully overall there will be an outcome that is beneficial for all teachers. Okay, so if you haven't done so already, do go and look at the consultation before 11:45 p.m. tonight and have your say. Let's get into how nuanced this is then, though. So I'll be answering it from a geography perspective. Because that is obviously my specialist subject. But if you're listening and you have an opinion from a different subject perspective, do call in or text in too and get involved. So the actual consultation itself covers many different subjects. So it's not just about geography, but there's other subjects as well. So dance, design and technology, drama and theatre, film studies, food preparation and nutrition, media studies, music technology and physical education, geography, geology, environmental science, and the assessment of speaking skills in MFL. Currently this year, the NEA requirements and non-examined assessments were changed for some GCSE and A-level courses to address the obstacles caused by the pandemic, some of which we have discussed previously on this show with Chris Cassels, the head of centre at the Cranedale Centre. So far in the pandemic, many centres, many fieldwork centres have closed down. So I think the current number is 30. So 30 field study centres have already closed down during the pandemic. So it's already quite a worrying statistic. Royal Geographic Society have clearly stated their beliefs. So they believe that the value of the fieldwork is undoubted, and they've said in their open response it can develop distinct geographical knowledge, understanding and skills. Frank asked me before what my personal perspective was on this. I agree. In geography, fieldwork certainly does develop distinct geographical knowledge, understanding and skills. It cannot be denied that the value of fieldwork is significant. I remember personally being a student and going on fieldwork trips. I went on a three-day residential trip to Castleton in year 12, my year 12 year, and it was invaluable. It taught me so much about rivers, and before seeing that, I never truly understood, I don't think, the processes that kind of were going on in and around rivers that we were constantly taught and we were expected to know from many different tests. So just like Stan said earlier about the crossovers between literacy and PE that had been pointed out to him about how could a student be expected to write about the difference between walking and crawling or crawling and crouching if they've never done them. And it's similar with geography and fieldwork. It's all well and good saying that a river meanders and that oxbow lakes form, and if you started at the source, everything that we say about rivers, it is all well and good, but it's very, very theoretical until you actually go and see it for yourself, until you can see that it happening live and actually at the scene of where it's happening, and you can measure it all yourself. You can see the different things that are happening. You can carry out your own observations, your own skills, and that is what fieldwork offers you. So I do agree with that, and I cannot deny that. I don't think anyone else does deny that. Royal Geographic Society also believes that not making it a requirement would force schools into the same restrictions as experienced in early stages of the pandemic, which apparently these policies contradict the guidance that are already given to the schools by the Department for Education. So, let's say, I don't think the benefits of fieldwork can be denied, and certainly, fieldwork opens up many opportunities and allows students to develop many skills. Furthermore, it can sometimes be the first time that students, particularly those from Black, Asian or minority ethnic or low-income backgrounds, as shown by the Landscapes Review in 2019, it could be the first time that those groups may have visited natural environments. And apparently 18% of children living in the most deprived areas have never visited the natural environment at all. So it is not just necessarily about these skills or the opportunities and showing the knowledge and the understanding, but for some people, it's purely getting out into seeing the rest of the world that's around them. And it could literally be a place that's 30 minutes away, but it hadn't been accessible for them before. So it does offer those opportunities. 30 sites closing as well. That's quite drastic if you think about the pandemic. So in terms of the consultation then, does that immediately mean that we should be opening up fieldwork, and that the requirement to complete fieldwork for NEA, so the 4 days of fieldwork at A level and the 2 days at two different sites at GCSE, should that be a requirement? Should that be brought back in this year? Personally, I think that there should be the opportunity for schools to do so. I definitely think that schools should be encouraged and given multiple opportunities to be able to carry out fieldwork as they would usually and as is expected of them in the past. So yes, certainly I think that they should be given the opportunity to be. Required, though, it is something different personally for me, because I think that there are some schools that have been so adversely affected by fieldwork, by the pandemic, that from my experience, from what I've heard, that the head teachers and other senior leaders in the school aren't prepared to let them go on field trips. Now, obviously, it's a legal requirement. Schools at the moment cannot stop, or in the past could not legally stop, geography departments from going on these field trips. They had to give the departments the time to go on these field trips. It was a legal entitlement of the students, and it was legally required of those departments to be able to go on field trips. That hasn't been the case this year because of the adaptations and the kind of considerations, as we said before, that have been put in place. But yeah, certainly if we are not denying the importance of fieldwork, then certainly we need to be making sure that schools have the opportunity to do so. Now, it comes to the question of, is there a difference between opportunity and requirement? And with too many schools, if you just went for opportunity rather than requirement, would too many schools say simply, we're not doing it? And at that point, are you taking away that experience from many young budding geographers who, amongst other things in the pandemic, have missed out on fieldwork opportunities potentially earlier in their school careers? Yeah, I don't know. Call in or text in if you have an opinion and share. Harriet Jennington was going to be joining us, and I saw that she had started to call in, but it appears. Oh, here we go. Harriet, can you hear me?
Hello, Niall.
Hello, Harriet.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, yeah, we can.
Amazing. I'd just like to first of all apologise for my voice. I am losing my voice now because it is the end of half term, but I assure you I'm all right. But if I sound a bit croaky, then I apologise. I think it's very, very interesting how you use the word opportunity and requirement. I am in the camp of, I think it should be a requirement. I'm currently reading the GA guidance because I do intend on filling out that survey myself after this radio show finishes, just to show my opinion. And I absolutely agree. Like, there'll be so many budding geographers who maybe are leaving year 11 now, who have absolutely no experience of fieldwork. I know that is the case for some of my year 11s who have left school today. There was no requirement. Well, yeah, we were meant to have done it. We were meant to take them to the coast at the end of their year 10 year, but obviously because of COVID, we couldn't. And then even in September, like, we still couldn't do that. And then obviously the requirements had changed where we wouldn't have to do that. And then the fieldwork paper that didn't have to require to be done either. And actually, because of the teacher assessed grades, we didn't even assess their like critical thinking skills with what would be like the unseen fieldwork in the GCSE paper. Essentially, the Multi Academy Trust had we just had to implement aspects of the course from paper 1 and paper 2, which was human and physical geography, and we didn't have to include anything about the inquiry process, unseen fieldwork methods, plotting data, none of that. So I already feel as if like we've done them a disservice. I know that there are some schools for their teacher assessed grades where they had a full on paper 1 mock, paper 2 mock, and then paper 3 mock, which was like the field work. So already there's a massive a massive variation in what students will be leaving with. Like, yeah, they'll have the teacher assessed grades, but their experiences that they will go into studying A level. So by year 12, the fieldwork, for AS level geography, Ofqual, they proposed to remove the requirements of 2 days of fieldwork to answering the questions in next year's exam relating to their own fieldwork experience, and they want to remove the requirement to retain unfamiliar fieldwork questions in the exams for AS level. So if that happens, then these year 11s going into year 12 will then maybe not have that experience in year 12, and then heaven knows what on earth will happen the year after next, because will this pave the way to be like, oh well, we don't really need to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
We can just have it in theory. So I'm very much in the camp of we need to get this back right now, otherwise it will devalue the how people see this qualification of geography at because I'm a geography teacher, but also just like if we remove it, will it ever come back? So that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's true though, isn't it? And like you say, you don't want to offer that opportunity of well, it worked all right last year without it. Yeah, and that's a lot of time that we have to give over. That's a lot of money that we have to spend. Let's just sacrifice that. And we know that based on how outdoor education as a whole, and we've obviously discussed that with Chris Cassels in previous weeks, we know how outdoor education has been kind of treated, particularly by the government during the pandemic, or some of people's views to it. So it wouldn't be put past them perhaps to kind of create that environment. So it's an interesting point to raise, and I think that kind of it's a point, Harriet, that is shared by many geography teachers across the country. And again, you don't want that to be lost. And potentially, if you're trying to rejuvenate the outdoor education industry, so we've already talked about 30 different sites and different centres closing. If you want to rejuvenate that, then straight away you need fieldwork, or you need schools to be going and visiting those places, because if not, they're just going to lose money and then they will go out of business. So definitely, if you want to kind of almost re-inject the economy of the outdoor education sector, then you need to do that quite quickly and allow that. So I definitely would agree with that part. I will just, because I agree, but I will throw out there in the sense of what would you say then to a school, because I know this situation has been happening, where they actually have to this point so far refused next year permission for geography departments to go on residential field trips, because they say that they don't have the money because they've been cashed up a little bit more by the pandemic, apparently. They don't have the time because they've got to catch up a lot because of the pandemic. And therefore, they will not permit the department to go on a said field trip. But of course, the responsibility relies on the department offering that, so they could come under quite a lot of scrutiny. So what would you say in that situation, Harriet?
Well, I think that there's a difference between like a residential or something which will take a long amount of time. And I mean, the schools have got a duty at the end of the day. It's the head teacher who is signing that form to say, yes, they have fulfilled the requirements for this geography course that they have done, the 2 or 4 days fieldwork or whatever. So, I mean, I think schools point blanking refusing now, it's negligent. But I think that there's a difference between like residentials or just allowing students to do fieldwork in their local area. I don't see how the risk is absolutely massive if you just take students just away for like a few hours or a morning, if it's an inner city school. Take them and study like urban issues, or like do a land quality survey, or maybe just interview people from a distance, or just take some photographs, or measure, I don't know, an urban heat island effect using just like temperature and wind anemometers. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yes.
Because you're still inculcating students into that process of inquiry and inculcating them into investigation and fieldwork, and not so they won't approach, if they do have to end up doing like paper 3 or like the skills element of it, if it's being examined, they won't do that completely blindfolded and just through a purely theoretical lens. They will actually be able to draw on concrete experience. And I will bring this back to students from low socioeconomic backgrounds won't have been exposed to this as much, and it's them who are going to be most disadvantaged if they have to just rely on something completely theoretical, and then that might put them off studying geography in the future, because they won't have been exposed to these things. And then obviously it's very, very interesting to know who's actually going on to study geography at universities. So for example, I went to a university where there were very few students who were from state schools and had only left the country a few times. The majority of the people were incredibly rich in experiences, having went skiing every Christmas, and they could draw on this wealth of experience. I mean, I was very lucky. I went on holidays with my family quite a lot, in this country, so I could draw on experiences of going to a river, going to a beach, climbing up a mountain, seeing glaciated landscapes and stuff like that. But there were a lot of students, as you say, who may have not left their local area and are only experiencing that geography there, but they can still draw on the fieldwork experiences, and then that will offer them so much more in terms of written assessments.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and it is also because we're talking there about again assessments and skills as a geographer. And one thing that they have said that, and we talk about scale, they did say one of the alternatives, or one of the things that they are talking about allowing to do, is if you have to have it you have to do field work in 2 different sites, you could apparently, they're saying, do it on the school site, which we know there's many different things that you could do fieldwork wise still on a school site, and then go somewhere else within a local area that is a slightly larger scale. So that they actually are talking about within this consultation that it doesn't have to be as black and white as, well, you've got to do 2 days and it has to be in 2 completely different locations. So you have to travel all over the country to do it. It's just making sure that actually schools can have some different kind of variations within it. So again, when you're talking about kind of whether it should be a requirement or a kind of opportunity, making it a requirement whilst having the caveat that actually you can do it in the ways that suit your school is probably, I think, the sort of way that I am leaning towards. And I think anyone that's listening, if you've got an opinion, do text in or call in, and definitely go and fill out the consultation answers if you have not done so already. The other thing I was going to say that, and you touched on it a bit, and Stan touched on it a bit earlier on in the show, about the skills that it provides on fieldwork that are not necessarily just about geography skills, so about leadership perhaps, or about the general nature of sharing with other people and kind of interacting with other people, or going and doing different skills that are maybe more conducive to society, rather than just exam knowledge. And I think actually something that we forget that people have missed out on in the pandemic is socializing, or spending time with each other, and actually having field work where students can socialize in an atmosphere different to a school and go and kind of explore in a different environment is something that actually contributes to their wider life. So you're talking about your students there that have left school and have never done field work. Okay, maybe they're going into doing geography, or will continue studying geography all the way through at university. But even for those that haven't, they've lost out that understanding or the opportunity to develop and to show off leadership skills, just like they would have missed out on the Duke of Edinburgh Award, for as many people have done this year as well. So I think that it's actually important to think, well, yeah, maybe they've missed out on tons and tons and tons of learning, but they've also missed out on tons of developmental and social opportunities as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree. I completely agree with that. And also just the element of just being able to just being conscious if you're in a physical environment, so for example near a river or somewhere quite remote, just gaining independent skills, so not even necessarily leadership skills, but just making sure that you understand how to look after yourself, conducting mini risk assessments. So for example, that rock looks slippy, I'm not going to stand on it. Just as basic stuff as that, which is kind of micro stuff that we do take for granted, but for students who will be experiencing that for the first time, it's massively character building. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, definitely. So if you would like to, now, if you have not done so already, and you would like to have your say, and you would like to vote to make fieldwork stay for 2022, or alternatively the other way, but yeah, if you have an opinion on it, then do go and look at the open consultation on arrangements for non-examined assessments for qualifications in 2022, and share your views on there. Right then, let's move into the designated Bennington's diaries alliteration topic for this week, which is talking about subject knowledge, Harriet. So let's talk about subject knowledge. How important? Let's start off with the wider question. How important is subject knowledge when teaching?
Oh, this is a minefield. So, in my opinion, as a subject specialist, well, geography is so wide ranging. I mean, I think that subject specialism is very, very important. Obviously, we've established that you don't necessarily have a degree in it, Niall, and you'll be teaching like A-level geography. And this. I'm going to compliment you here, and then you're also going to be teaching a bit of sociology as well. I think that the investment that you have and will show into like increasing your subject knowledge around issues like in sociology and geography is completely admirable. But my main issue with regards to subject knowledge is I think that there is not really that much opportunity provided during initial teacher education to really honestly confront maybe like lack of subject knowledge in like certain areas. So for example, apart from like a subject knowledge audit, which was just one of the requirements for my like initial teacher education, I didn't have to do a subject knowledge enhancement course. All I had to do was just kind of rag myself against the curriculum, which like the Key Stage 3 curriculum. So for example, my knowledge of, say, Russia is an element on the curriculum, geography Key Stage 3 curriculum to be studied. My knowledge of it is poor. And therefore, I had to put on my NQT action plan that I would improve my knowledge of Russia. And I mean, aside from the resources on like the Geographical Association and reading textbooks and stuff like that, I mean, no one's really assessed it. I haven't had to like sit a test to be like, all right, well, Miss Dennington's knowledge of Russia is fine now, so you're allowed to teach that. And I think it's very, very weird how we kind of conceptualize subject knowledge and how it's taken up by only like one or two of the teaching standards, when actually, in my opinion, subject knowledge should be at the forefront of what it means to be a teacher. So I don't know if you want to chip in there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That it is so important. I think and I guess geography is easy to talk about in terms of content because it is so expansive, and naturally no one tends to do a completely 50-50 split of physical and human geography. So naturally most people are either physical or human specialists and have then missed out a whole half of the subject overall immediately beforehand. Then there's all of the additional specialism and specialist kind of minute pieces of knowledge that you would be expected to teach across your kind of school, secondary geography teaching career. And there's no way that you could have covered them in a degree nature beforehand. And I agree with you in terms of the actual assessment of your own knowledge. So we talk constantly about assessment and evidence that you've actually got, kind of that you are doing something in teaching and showing that evidence. But the evidence for your subject knowledge, like you say, is mainly your subject knowledge audit and what have you done, but not necessarily kind of what, like, have you retained it? I guess it comes across though in your teaching. So if you were to then teach Russia and you were having an observation and the observer goes, yeah, she clearly doesn't know actually much about Russia, and she's kind of just reading off of her slides, or she's kind of just reading or copying information from a textbook. And then at that point, they may call you up on it and say, look, like kind of based on that. The issue with that is that actually most of the time people get to choose their observations. So if you knew at that point that you were unlikely to teach a kind of amazing lesson with perfect subject knowledge on Russia, then you probably just wouldn't choose that for your observation. Or you would or if you knew that it was going to be an observation, you would spend tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of time kind of going through it. I guess that then comes into my next question, which is the difference between skills and knowledge. Now, is there a point where perhaps you have all of the geographical skills that one needs to be able to possess and teach to kind of convey brilliant kind of subject knowledge as such in terms of skills, that then if you can research pieces of information or pieces of knowledge and apply it within those skills, could you then teach it quite competently? I don't know how you feel about that, whether that's possible or whether you actually think that you need to, because I don't know, like sometimes if I know that I'm doing a lesson on a topic that I'm not so kind of competent with, that perhaps I haven't tried to kind of develop my subject knowledge for before in the past, then I will research it, like you say, and kind of look for it just before the lesson. And sometimes that is enough to have quite a lot of knowledge to be able to teach it in a really good way. I mean, I don't know what you think about that, or whether you actually think that subject knowledge needs to be kind of academic journals and testing yourself rigorously on that beforehand.
I think that is such a good question, you know, like, and I will be thinking about that question even after I hang up, like in a few minutes' time, because I think that's kind of what we're even trying to instill in our students. The fact that, like, yes, there's constantly new knowledge coming out, but we kind of need to equip them with the skills to make sense of everything. So we could teach them about the latest theory of plate tectonics, but then we would kind of want their skills and that impact that we have on them for them to discern in the future when new knowledge comes out and to make sense of that. So I definitely think actually that the skills of, just being able to maybe teach something completely unfamiliar. So for example, a few weeks ago, I had to cover a maths lesson, and it was terrifying. And I realized right then that, you know what, I'm a teacher of my subject, because when I was like, and rather than a teacher of children, I know that there's a massive debate about this, and I do the children are the reason why I do the job, but at the same time, I'm a teacher of geography.
Yeah.
I'm not a teacher of maths, and I would not say I teach the children first, because when I was teaching maths, it was shambolic. It was absolutely dreadful, and I was sweating. I was like, well, I've never ever had to, you know, confront the fact that I don't really know the subject better than the kids. So in terms of geography, like, I mean, I've struck gold with the subject that I'm teaching. But so bringing this back to like to teachers and our role as like subject specialists, like I said, I think your question was very, very good, and I guess that is what the training year is about. It's like maybe it's the process of like, well, what have you done to action increasing your knowledge of this topic, and just kind of instilling the fact that teachers are never going to know absolutely everything. We do have to kind of keep like your feet in two different rooms, like constantly trying to update the subject knowledge, but also getting the skills to translate that knowledge into a pedagogy that the students can actually learn from. So yeah, that's a very, very, very interesting question, which I will be pondering on more.
Yeah, I think it's one that like kind of comes up a lot, and I mean, I don't necessarily have an answer to it. I would say as well that subject knowledge is an interesting one, because I think that the teachers either, like you say beforehand, if no one's necessarily kind of pulling you up on it, it is one that you either you are willingly and actively choosing to engage in debates around kind of all of the latest debates around the subject, because you feel that is kind of your duty, or that it would make you the best teacher possible. You could equally say, well, actually, I am kind of quite competent, and I guess after say maybe 10 years of teaching, I mean, I don't know, depends on your attitude towards teaching, where you've gone, I've taught this so many times now that even if it's changed slightly, it's still relatively the general gist. It's generally the same. And I've got so much other things that I need to do. So actually, I'm just going to teach the same lesson that I've taught like the last 3 or 4 years, and that'll be fine. And I'm not criticizing that point of view either, because I think that teaching is, when you talked about the teacher standards and the things that you're expected to do, on top of things that are hidden teacher standards, like building relationships and kind of following up on different things that are going around that they're not really necessarily in the teacher standards, but they underpin all of them kind of all the way through. You are required to do so much as a teacher that something has to give. And actually, you shouldn't have to sacrifice your whole life, including kind of evenings and including your weekends and your holidays, just to be able to
just to be like constantly at the forefront of knowledge, to teach your kids that. I completely agree. With regards to you, like to what you were saying about like hypothetically, I've taught this a few times, so I'm not going to change it. I hope that I never get to that stage, because like even just a quick Google search a few days before I'm teaching something, like I'm confident with, like, for example, plate tectonics, I will be researching like recent examples and videos that I can show. So for example, Darwin's Arch, when that collapsed, I added that into a coasts lesson. Just constant like little things just to kind of even keep it relevant for me, because I think as teachers it's quite easy to become complacent. Like, yeah, I've taught it a few times, the kid seems to have got it, so I'll just teach it exactly the same. Like every single group of kids will be different, the needs will be different, and I think it's the fact that we're constantly trying to teach that geography to that kids in that classroom in the best way, in that context, which is why I love teaching geography so much. It's not just like a lecturer at the front of the classroom going, this is the knowledge, if you get it, if you don't, it's not my problem.
Yeah, definitely. I think that again, I actually kind of like come back to what you said before about teach your subject, teach your kids first, or whatever. I would say that I'm the opposite, but not because like not in any way, just because I think that for me, I absolutely love geography, obviously, and particularly human geography, and I would say that even though my degree isn't titled geography, that I've kind of done many different types of human geography and have those skills, as we talked about, to be able to do so, and take pride in trying to keep up and teaching the correct thing. And I feel guilty if I feel that I've taught something wrong, or that kind of I've done a disservice almost to students as a result of it. But at the same time, I don't take it personally when students say, "Oh, I just don't like geography," or "I don't do well at geography." Obviously, I try to make my lessons, as engaging, as interesting, and kind of as encompassing as possible for them. But even if you do that, it doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily just find it easy, or suddenly pick up. And so at that point, my sometimes I kind of in my head it is like, well, okay, so that they're not going to ever love geography in a way where they're definitely going to choose it at GCSE and take it on at A level. But what can I do with this lesson? What can I do in terms of the relationship that I have with them that gets them engaged and gets them interested in the subject? And sometimes that is making links. And the thing that we're so lucky with geography is it's so quick and so easy to make a link to students and the world. We don't have to. It doesn't have to be. Well, sometimes it can be a tenuous link, but it doesn't really have to be a tenuous link. It's quite easy to say, "Oh, well, you are impacted by this because," or "this is happening in your lives because," and to draw it back to them. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to kind of understand geography academically, but you can still get that engagement and that interest. And sometimes I think that requires as well other things that aren't necessarily to do with the subject. So maybe building that relationship or showing an interest in students and kind of getting the interest that way. And I definitely think that there are skills that you can teach within geography, like leadership skills as well, which I think are important to give students at every point of the thing. So I don't think one's right or wrong. I just think it is interesting kind of how people kind of take the different personalities, I think, and the different priorities that teachers have, or kind of the interests as well.
Definitely, I agree. And the thing is, when the students leave school and when they maybe think back to their geography lessons, like maybe 7 or 8 years onwards, it probably isn't the content of the knowledge in the lessons that they remember. It will be how the teachers made them feel. So there are times where like, I just persevere. If the kids find like the geological cycle boring, I'm like, well, no, we are going to continue to learn this because this is important. So they might just remember, oh, well, that lesson was really boring, or like, oh, well, she just, yeah. So it's how we make them feel. So whether or not it will be at the forefront of the knowledge, or whether you're just going to try and like plan engaging lessons, I agree. It's the longer impact that you're going to have on the kids, and that essentially does stem back from like relationships and how you make them feel.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes if you can slowly encourage them that they actually really love geography without them realizing that that's the even better one. I think Kit Rackley wants to join us, so if they'd like to call in and then have a plug, feel free to stay on the line as well.
Sweet.
Hey, can you hear us? Should be joining now, I think. Something's gone on there. I don't know what's happened. we'll just wait for Kit to join us. But yeah, it is interesting with subject knowledge. So we'll wait and see.
Have you finished your PGCE placement now, Niall?
No, I've got two.
Got a few weeks left.
Yeah, I've got half term, and then we've got 2 weeks and 2 days after that. I think 2 weeks and 3 days. Yeah, so
amazing.
And then it feels strange because it's kind of like you've got to the point now where I don't know. Yeah, like kind of you almost like 2 weeks after half time is quite hard to kind of do. Like we're starting new topics. It's like, well, I'm going to teach kind of 2 or 3 hours maybe of this topic, and then then you got to go. But it'd be sad. I'd be sad to kind of see some of my classes go because and kind of well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens when that does happen. But no, they're like some of them are kind of very, very cool. We had a politics lesson today, which was very interesting. Keep stalling.
I've got plenty to talk about.
Well, Harry, if you'd like to go ahead and say anything, then you go ahead.
Well, I just had another question, to be honest, Niall. Have you engaged with the concept of maybe teaching the Anthropocene within your like initial teacher education? Like, have you had any conversations with like other trainee teachers with regards to like what it is, or maybe like if you've been looking at like what to teach A level, like have you engaged with the Anthropocene as like an object of thought? Do you know what the Anthropocene is?
Yes, I mean I do, and I've read the book Adventures into the Anthropocene.
Excellent.
And we've had discussions on it, but not necessarily kind of talked about it as a key concept necessarily from what I can remember. But I have taught it, and I taught it today as part of my climate change lesson. We got to the end of the climate change topic, and I was trying to talk to them about some of the things that people have done. So I made a little guided reading exercise with the glacier man at the centre of the guided reading, and try to teach students about the ideas and to empower them. I mean, Kit has obviously came on the show beforehand and talked about climate change as a safeguarding issue and their opinion on, or kind of their views on how schools should be teaching climate change down. And I was very much teaching the empowerment side of, look, this is happening. It is quite pressing when you look at it and can be quite worrying, but there are also a lot of things that we can be doing. And then I got them to write a letter to an MP today, which there's some very good letters on that as well. And then we went into politics, and then they voted me to stay as their class teacher.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, but then I did tell them that I wasn't in a. So we had a manifesto as well. We did a manifesto, and we were teaching them how fast first past the post works. So there was 3 constituencies within our class, and each teacher. There's 2 teaching teams with 3 teachers in them. So each constituency was voting for one of the 2 teachers. Okay, I think Kit can now join us. So
amazing.
Let's hope that they've managed to get through to the studio. Kit, can you hear us? Okay. Maybe not. I'm just gonna keep going on. Strange. Have you got headphones plugged in?
Have you made sure that your microphone has given permission for the Podbean app? Because that's what happened to me before. Hang on, I could hang up and then I could hang up if you want, Niall, and then you could try and get Kit on like the number 1 call in.
If you'd like to try, it might be because of that update. But yeah, if you'd like to try Harriet, then we can see if it will work.
Do you want to hang me up, Niall? Because I don't actually know how to hang up.
I'll hang you up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so it should be working. So Kit can call in. It says invite. I've invited, and then it hasn't followed through. don't quite know. It's flashing red and white. Would anyone else in the studio right now, anyone else that's listening in, would you like to call in just to make sure that it's not my end? Harriet, call in again. See if you can call back up. All right, Harriet, you're back in now, yeah?
Yep. Like it seemed pretty seamless for me,
Interesting.
which is surprising because I'm not very tech savvy.
Yeah. So what happens? So you call in, I click invite back, and then you can. What happens after that? Do you just join it in?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Kit's going to my other account. Hopefully it'll work. But yeah, going back to so then we had 3 constituencies. So the left side of the room, the right side of the room, the centre. There were 3 constituencies, and we also showed them that constituencies can have different numbers of people within them. So the centre had slightly more people. So we're trying to teach them how first past the post works, and that it wasn't total votes; it was to do with number of seats. And so we had the 3 sections across the room, and we had manifestos. It was slightly rigged. I will say that it was slightly rigged. I was very, very happy to basically give students what they wanted. So on my manifesto, I had students are allowed to express themselves as much as possible, including dyeing their hair, having piercings, and wearing hoodies. I also said that they were allowed to talk constantly. They were going to have a reduced timetable to just 3 lessons a day based on only their favourite subjects, and that they could talk endlessly throughout every lesson, and their lessons would be fun. And I think there was one other, but I can't remember what it was. And then the alternative was that they had to stay in silence for every single lesson. They had to have a really strict uniform policy because it was a grade leveler, and they were going to have to stay in until 6 p.m. every day to catch up on their lockdown learning. So maybe it wasn't surprising that they voted for my party to win. But then I taught them how politics works, and I explained that I wasn't actually in a position to put forward or to follow through with the policies that I had promised them, and that only 1 or 2 of them could actually be done.
That sounds very good though. Like that sounds incredibly empowering. And I think that there is a real need to educate students about stuff like that, like nowadays. I mean, I could question whether where's the geography, but I'm not going to, because I think that it is empowering, and it's equipping students with that critical knowledge of, how politics works, how the country works, and kind of like maybe just giving them an interest, so that when they vote in like 5 years time, they would want to vote. They would actually want to have a say in like democracy. So yeah, that's very, very good.
Yeah, no, questioning where's the geography is a fair point. It was off, let's say, off curriculum, because we had got to the end of the topic and they were very inquisitive beforehand about what was like how politics worked in the UK. So we combined it with their own inquiry into what the UK government was doing about climate change and what other regions around the world were doing. And then they wrote their letters to the MP, and we explained how someone becomes to be an MP, and then did that as part of it. And then we talked about different types of activism as well. So we were trying to cover the spectrum of climate change activism, essentially. Third time lucky. Let's try again then. Let's see if this will work for third time then, Kit. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Drum roll. Should we get a drum roll? Let's see if we've got audio effects. Let's have a drum roll. Where we got it? I know we've got one. Where's my drum roll? Here we go. Oh. Try again, Kit. Just click the call button. It's flashing green now. Oh, I haven't got anything. Let me think. End the call and then see if you can get it again. because I saw it come up. Ah, okay.
Can
Yes, we can.
Oh my goodness! For screwing up your show, and you've probably lost listeners now. I'm sorry, everybody. Blame me. When I first started to try and call in, the thing was flashing red. So I tried my work phone, which from before, and that worked fine. Not this. I don't know. Hello, everybody. How are you doing this?
So yeah, we're good, Kit. How are you?
Oh no, I sneakily jumped to plug a few things actually, which I know everyone. First of all, I want to pick up hear you again. It's fantastic. And
Hello, Kit.
We play a bit of a game.
Uh-huh.
There's a tiny bit of a lag on the line here. Feel that? Okay, right. Now, one of the things there's two things. One, which is it doesn't matter if you're any kind of teacher. We've all got who are aspiring towards, 16, higher education, all that kind of stuff. So the other thing I want to plug is Niall is aware of my own podcast, Coffee and Geography. But the links to geography, that's right, because what we do, we each show to come up with a word that's to link to geography. Here's the game. Who wants to go first, or Niall? Do you want to go first?
Harriet, go first.
Niall, no, Niall, you can go. You can go, Niall.
I'll go first. I'll go first.
All right. Okay. I'm going to choose one of the words that I've recorded with so far came up with. Right. I want to, because you were talking about things like being and you can loosely link things to geography. The test, right? And I know that we could be. I'm a geographer, I know. So, but let's go for it. Okay. So 30. Can you please link faith? And I don't know if you've got a little ticky timer on your soundboard, but you can play that if you want.
We've got a countdown. Well, I'm connecting faith to what?
Geography.
Faith to geography.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's quite easy, isn't it?
Well, of course you'd say that. Oh, 30 seconds.
9,
I'll give us
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, you can connect faith. Hang on, Harry, wait for 2 seconds. I'm going to leave and rejoin as Sam keeps cutting out. But yeah, I think that's not just you, Harry. We'll wait and see. So faith is connected to geography because you have multiple faiths across the world with different countries and different regions within it, and different communities that come together. So faith is all about a community, and you have communities across the world that could be connected through faith. So is that too vague?
Okay.
Trying to be more specific.
No, not at all. So yeah, a lot of people's is based on the environment, so you base their take the Greeks for example. They would the god of fire, and that's where we have the name volcano that comes. That's just one. People go for their faith, and of course massive boost of tourism, and you've got all prices go up in to order to go because everybody's traveling to there at the same time. We could go on for this all night now, can't we?
Yeah.
So that's that. Right, it's Harriet. Do Harriet now.
Yep,
Yeah.
go on.
Right, Harriet. Now I'm thinking about trouble is, my list of what other guests have said. Let's have a look. Okay, I'll tell you what. This latest guest to come up with, and I'm going to be listening, but I'm going to record this when I do the next recording. So let's see if you can do this one. Really hard, I think. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want you the para.
I'm really sorry, Kit. I can't hear you.
Oh no!
Yeah, we lost you there.
The paranormal to geography.
Oh, the paranormal geography. Okay. Right. I don't know if you want to do that countdown thing again. I'll have a think.
Yeah. I'll do a countdown and then we'll do a drum roll.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, right. This is a very, very tenuous link again. So I'm going to kind of link it with kind of epistemology and how it might not be of like full scientific understanding, but where did that noise come from? But different, so for example, different cultures, different countries, they maybe have like laws or customs which are linked to kind of like the paranormal and how that links with like the natural world, rather than how like so for example, during uni I read this paper that said science for the West, myth for the rest, and how like different I like that. So yeah, that's my take on it. Paranormal in terms of like how like maybe spirituality and how like like ethereal and like this other world can kind of link with our lived experience. So yeah.
Nice one. You got the soundboard right. Well, very well. And I was just seeing if I could go. If anybody's put no, everyone's too shy. Geographers, but yeah, you could have, a lot of paranormal found to be weather conditions, clouds, for example, obviously, and there you go. Right, well done. Right, okay. Next guest, when I record with her on, we'll see if she does as well as you, Harriet, because that was pretty.
Thank you.
When tune in.
Yeah, so that's the coffee. Reason why we put it together, and we feel this, and everybody listening as well, is that over the past year and a bit, we had our community. We've all had to step up to the plate, but I tell you what, and I've been really, really proud of everybody. Not just how hard you're all working, tags and tags right now, which are an absolute pain. Worst part of the teaching and not being paid. And chat about that on the call already. The other thing I've been is how we've all really galvanized, and we've done it online because of circumstances, and we've been able to connect country. And I know that Tom's pretty radio's been going because it's really in connecting us all over the internet. What I decided to do, I thought, well, each other a little bit more, take and stuff like that. So I just thought it's how our lives are connected to geography and geographers, and if the guest isn't a geographer, be a geographer by the end of their talk. So that's basically it. And if you're interested in being a guest, or you someone who is, or Niall, I know I've already as well, and Harriet, absolutely just it's Coffee Jog Pod on Twitter, and then see what we can do. So that's the first thing. Does anyone want to ask anything about that before I completely take over the show from Niall?
I would love to come on.
Yeah. Yes, and I think you'd probably come up plenty of time to think of come up for the guest that. That's the other thing we want to do. We want to chain the guests together. Got coming on is originally from family, actually owned a coffee farm station.
Oh my god!
So that's pretty awesome. In a few weeks' time, I'm going to speak and who is a meteorologist in Malawi. So get all around the world with people, which is and friends from coming up.
That's amazing.
I've got another question for you too. Who's listening in the chat? Happening for the whole of next month. If it happens in the UK, it happens in the States, Western culture, for the whole of it. And for the of me and my, what do you reckon's happening next month? I wish I could say it was geography teacher.
Pride. Is it Pride?
Yeah,
It's Pride. Harriet. Yeah. So this is for everybody out there now. Job I work as outreach officer in East Anglia, and one of the things that we're going to be is a program for LGBTQ kids. This towards 13 to 19-year-old. So everyone here who teach secondary, that's all. And it's for kids who are LGBTQ and are considering education as their post-16 options. We know that kids have they're very, with going through puberty. I mean, God, I will be when I start HRT, but that's so it's already a tough time for them. We know that a bit earlier, when I was listening a bit earlier about how when you're now seeing your year 11s or year 5, or you're finishing your PGCE, kids that you've been teaching for last. So it's very, and if you're or you're questioning your identity or something, extra vulnerable on top of that. And we've got loads of positive stories from LGBTQ individual education from East Anglia, University of East Anglia, University of Suffolk University, and some the brilliant Dr. who's a fantastic biologist. She's a trans woman, so she's done a little piece for us. All you teachers need to do, off your work, it won't interrupt your cags and tags, don't worry about that. All you need to do is just take your Pride HE Twitter, and everything will come to you. Need to do is access it, show it to your kids, feel proud, make them see the education, and to it. So it's called Pride, and we're using the Pride in HE hashtag. I didn't intend to do the podcast. It's talking about linking things to geography.
we only got ourselves to blame.
I'll type it in the chat, and then, but that's a plug for work. So rather
Okay.
do that, I've got railing the conversation. I'm so sorry.
It's perfectly fine. There you go. Hashtag take your Pride HE. And get involved in that project. For anyone that's listening and listening back as well at the end of the show.
Amazing.
So thank you for.
I'm going to leave you two.
That's past the end of the show. It's fine. There's always a distraction, isn't there? There's always one distraction in the corner.
Oh, Harriet, get in touch about the podcast, and everybody. You're doing an amazing job. Please do try to give yourself some holiday. All right, you all deserve it. Enough, speaking to Dave, who said he's going away for a few, taking stacks of marking with him, and I remember doing that myself. So, but everybody, you're worth more to the kids than a piece of paper on on your desk. So, great work. No, Harriet.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kit.
What a pleasure, Kit.
And that also brings us towards the end of the show as well. So thanks, Harriet, for coming on tonight and for discussing the return of Dennington's Diaries, which we've tried to do for the last couple of weeks. And it finally has returned, and it returned with a bang as well. So
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We'll make sure that Dennington's Diaries reappears again in a couple of weeks as well when the show returns.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Harriet.
Thank you.
Okay. So that brings us to the end of the show. But don't we have a whole range of amazing shows for you over the weekend on Teachers Talk Radio. So Mira Chudasama with the breakfast show tomorrow morning. Then we have Graham Collins swapping from his usual Sunday brunch to Saturday brunch show to discuss normalising our flaws in the classroom from 11 a.m. And Tom Hopkins Burke will be joined on the Saturday lunch show by Ben Newmark and Sean Webster discussing Ben's inquiry into the history of people with learning difficulties and disabilities. So, of course, if you want to listen back, you can do that now over at the Teacher Talk Radio website at www.ttradio.org. I've been Niall Cole. Have a lovely weekend. Have a happy half term. And I will see you in a couple of weeks. So that is the end of the show now. Have a lovely half term. And we'll see you soon.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.